To my latest or last session of our Keynotes 2021. My name is Carsten Beiniger. I'm the product manager of PlantTools, and this session is about product development as a service, specifically for PlantTools. Okay. Yeah, you probably, I think if I look at the attendees list, you probably joined one or more sessions I had the last, well, today and the last 2 days. So I think I can skip over that. I'm essentially responsible for the, especially the technical part of our process plant department. And together with my colleague Susanne Nell, we are heading that department. Auxalia, we have over 30 years of experience. Actually, it should be 4,600 customers. At least that's what it says on the German slides. And 70 employees. We are 70 employees, and we have 9 branches, 7 in Germany, 1 in Switzerland, and 1 in also Vienna or Austria. Sorry, a little bit tired. Last session. Yeah, these are the sessions. Our headquarters is in Hamburg, in northern Germany. And so first, I want to start with a little history of PlantTools and how we typically started way back in 2008, actually, with the development of PlantTools. A long time ago. So let's have a look at the various PlantTools in order, in chronological order of when they were developed. So we started, or when I started with Plant3D 2009, P90 2009, I instantly recognized, okay, I can draw P90s, but how do I create a list? Equipment list, line list, whatever. So there was nothing, and my instant reaction was, okay, we need to develop something. And this is how we started in 2008, and the first version of Plant Reporter was then released in January of 2009. Together, actually, I cannot recall it that way, but or remember it that way, but apparently together with Plant Data Manager, although I think, well, that was the first official release. You also recognize the orange icons we had at that time. We were still AC Plant Consult at that time, and AC Plant Consult had yellow icons with the AC Plant Designer, which was acquired by Autodesk, but I modified it slightly to orange. Yeah, it changed now. We will see in a moment. Then came Plant Center, which was essentially a user interface to host starting icon for AutoCAD P90 and Plant Reporter, Plant Data Manager with an integrated viewer. Then we started with Plant Express Tools based on a requirement from a customer here in Germany with the coordinate function of Plant Express Tools. That was the first function. And now we have, I think, 22 functions in Plant Express Tools alone. Yeah, the license manager, for completeness, I mentioned that here. It's of course not a plant tool in general, but it's part. And the license manager is also used for some years now by my colleagues with their applications for Revit or AutoCAD Architecture, AutoCAD MEP. So we use that as well. Then came Plant Sync, and I will say a few words later on. That was actually, let's say, triggered and paid for partly by GE Jenbacher at that time in Austria. Now it's Inio Jenbacher. I will again mention that later on again. Plant Link was also developed then in 2010. Then came Plant Clash Detection 2011, and the last plant tool we actually developed was Plant Spec Driven. That was also paid by a customer. We started with the development in 2012, and yeah, this is in 2012 I sold my company AC Plant Consult to CAD Studio at that time, and CAD Studio had a red company color, so we changed the icon for Plant Spectrum. And then over the years, all the icons were replaced by red ones, and now as CAD Studio, we have the green ones. Okay, now we have a marketing department who takes care of the icons. So convenient. Okay, Plant Data Manager, Plant Reporter, Plant Link, Plant Clash Detection, and Plant Center. Those five plant tools we developed based on what we thought is needed for our customers. Again, as I mentioned, there was no report capability to create a report other than, okay, export the data from Data Manager to Excel and then use an Excel macro or whatever. That was the idea of Autodesk. And I said, no, that's not going to work here in Europe. The customer wants to click on a button and then they want to have a report. So that was let's say the initial way that, okay, I thought, okay, there is some need. There are missing functions in AutoCAD P&ID or then later AutoCAD Plant 3D, and we need to do something about that. Then, of course, there was continuous improvement of these plant tools or these or existing features, and we did bug fixing, and we adapted the plant tools, of course, also for the repeated new versions of AutoCAD P&ID and AutoCAD Plant 3D. And then we also got feedback from our customers, and the smaller or the features or requirements, which let's say took a few hours or so often, we added them to the functionality. So in around, let's say, 2016, there was a shift in our customer base where more and more customers asked us to develop additional features. And I mentioned Plant Sync. This was actually triggered by INEO. They started with AutoCAD P&ID it was either 2008 or 2009. I think 2008. And what they wanted is the ability to have the same symbology or blocks in AutoCAD in all their projects. So they wanted to use one template project, which is a common approach, but all the existing projects were supposed to use these the same symbols or symbol library, whatever you want to call it. So I thought about this and we made a quote, but let's say the sending of the PO took quite a while. So we already started with the development, and then the PO eventually came. But originally, INEO or GE at that time wanted to have a solution for the symbols, but I thought, what about all the other settings in P&ID? At that time, there was no Plant 3D. So I thought about an approach okay, we want to be able to synchronize, this is why it's called Plant Sync, or transfer settings in general of P&ID to other projects. And this is how Plant Sync started, but it was essentially, the idea was triggered and paid for in part by GE at that time. And so what are the motivations for customers to ask us for development? So the main requirement or the main motivation is that customers want to have let's say a solution for their requirement in a timely manner. They don't want to wait years and hope maybe Autodesk develops something. And in fairness to Autodesk cannot develop everything. It's just the market is so diverse in any industry essentially, but in plant over the various let's say Autodesk has this word geo, so if you are in Northern America or in Europe, and even within Europe, of course, there are differences, not just with the content, but also in regards to workflows. So it is essentially impossible often for a big company to find or to satisfy every customer or every requirement, let me put it that way. So, but the customer cannot wait. The customer wants to be getting more and more proactive nowadays. Again, changed around, or it started for us in 2016. Another reason is, or motivation is, that the requirement is very unique. So it's essentially impossible that someone will develop something just coincidentally suiting your requirement. So this is another one, and I will mention later on 2 examples from the same customer where we had that situation. Typically what I do, well, I will explain that in a moment. Or another motivation is that let's say an engineering company wants to have some competitive advantage in creating their drawings or their data. So maybe, yeah, this is also a motivation. And then 2 more, in general, to improve the way PNIDs are created, either faster, creating less errors, so having check functions on and so on, and being more user-friendly, and simply provide workflows which Plant3D out of the box does not support, or it's just very cumbersome to use a Plant3D for a specific workflow. You have to do a lot of manual steps maybe. A good example is the spec-driven mode in Plant3D, which I don't know, is probably not used by anyone, at least not realistically or on a larger scale. And this is why we develop Plant spec-driven for a customer, and I will get back to that as well. The last point I have here is improvements in data management. So this is also a trend for several years now, where companies want to, let's say, integrate more and more departments within their company. Maybe if I think about PNIDs, so maybe attach ERP systems to the data in PNID, exchange data, yeah, have some sort of tool or application where a data exchange is supposed to happen. SAP is another example, or just have more data flow within the drawings or between PNID and 3D. So everything in regards to data, which is not necessarily visible in the drawing, but it's part of the project. So what are the advantages of customized development? Well, it's you get a solution for your requirement. So an example I mentioned, now Inyo Jenbacher, this is something we developed last year, 2020, yeah, I think. This was 2 features, and one was to be able to create projects and drawings, so Plant3D projects and drawings, out of another application. In case of Inyo, it was they use an Access user interface essentially, and there is a database behind it which hosts all their projects and some key property or values like the project name and some project relevant values or fields or properties. And they wanted to be able to press a button in the Access UI, which then starts Plant3D and creates a project and creates drawings and fills out the properties of the project and the drawings. And the reason for them was, I found it very interesting, because I never heard of that requirement, and I'm doing that for over 33 years. But I asked them, how many projects do you create each year? Well, 1,500, 5 a day approximately. They have very small projects, typically 2 to 5 PNIDs, and they are pretty standardized. So that was part one. And there is hardly any other customer who can make use of that. You can use it, but there are not a lot of customers. It's not now that it is developed. It's not a matter of how many projects you create. You can also use it to have a standardized workflow or approach to create projects. So you can use it also in your tools. But at that time, it was very unique. And another tool we developed for them is a rule-based block insert. Since their PNIDs or projects are very standardized, they have another database which drives the content of the PNIDs. They have blocks and or assemblies, and based on rules they can define and data from a data source or database. These blocks or assemblies will be inserted in the various PNIDs based on rules, and project done, so to speak. Only some minor touches depending on some parameters or other situations. Yeah, so if a customer comes to us, I typically, based on my experience, I can generalize that feature. So I want to make a feature more attractive for other customers. Let me put it that way. So even if a customer has a specific requirement, based on my experience, I try to make it more general so it can be useful for other customers as well. And why that is important, I will explain also in a moment. The advantage is that, so what we do is, if we develop something for you, that feature will become part of one of our 8 PlantTools. And the advantage is that because of that, it is automatically maintained throughout its lifetime. Bug fixing or adaptations or improvements of that feature from other customers, or just because we improve it, this all will be handled. And also, if Autodesk brings out a new version like 2022 now, this feature will also be automatically adapted on the new AutoCAD Plant 3D version. So you don't need to ask us again, can you please adapt this for AutoCAD Plant 3D 2023 or whatever. It is done. You just pay your regular maintenance or your subscription, and that's it. No additional costs needed. Now, so this slide shows a short version of the process when you ask us for development or for a feature. So you have a request, and then we talk, and we come up with a specification for you, not for the developer. That comes later. So we write a specification. So you, first of all, you see if we understood it correctly, and also that we can make sure that, well, we deliver what you asked for. And in addition to that specification, there will be a quote. And I will get back to the details on the next slide. Then we start with the development process. There will be pre-releases typically, depending on the, let's say, complexity of the feature. If it's a very simple one, then we may not create pre-releases, but typically we do. Sometimes we create only videos, or in addition to the pre-releases, we create videos to keep you in the loop, to get also your feedback, which then, while developing, flows into the development process. And then at the end, we have a final release, which we then make public. So every user, every customer who has that plant tool and has a maintenance agreement or a subscription license can use that function as well. Next slide is now the detailed workflow, and here I can talk a little bit more about the requirements, so the details, of course. So again, you approach us with a request, and when you either send us an email or or call us. I will have some initial questions. Typically, since I'm doing this for quite some time, I typically have an idea what you try to accomplish, and I can typically initially or instantly ask some, let's say, questions to get a better understanding, so I'm not completely wrong in my thinking. And depending on the complexity, we will either have, well, especially now with Corona, either we make online sessions, or we have an online session, or we do it in person. If it's more complex, for example, what I mentioned, the example, the planned project create and the rule-based block insert, these two features for INEO, we had a 2-day workshop because also more people at the customer side were involved. And often the customer didn't, because I come up with ideas how to solve that requirement, it's often leads into some sort of brainstorming session because it's not clear from the customer side, especially when it's more complex, and I have to ask a lot of questions to get that to get the details. And typically, yeah, on day one I listen and I ask some questions, and my head is already spinning to come up with solutions. And then on the second day, I try to provide a solution. I ask more details to or ask more questions to get the details of the requirement. Also, in that part, it typically is very clear in what or in which of the PlantTools that function will be integrated. It's typically quite clear where that will be, but the customer typically does not know all the PlantTools necessarily and doesn't know where it fits best. Also depends on the workflow and so on. So after the workshop, I will write the specification for you. And as I said before, based on my experience, you will, in the specification, you will see there are areas which you didn't ask for, but I put it in the specification so you get an understanding what to expect. And we sent this specification to you to get your feedback, to make sure that that we understood it correctly and you understand how we want to solve that. And based on your feedback, this will be incorporated into the specification. Maybe there are multiple circles or loops, and then we have a final specification which then will be approved by you. And if this is approved, we will send you a quote. And when we send the quote, when we calculate the quote, we consider, how likely is it that this function is interesting also for other customers. I mentioned now INEO with a, let's say, planned project create to create projects from another application, or the rule-based block insert. These may be, these are typically functions which are not too interesting for other customers. Although I have someone from Gia here in the call. We just had an email exchange before that session. He is looking into the rule-based block insert, and there are customers who are working on, let's say, more standardized blocks or projects. So that may be of interest. But if I look at the whole market, and again, I have a lot of experience, there are not a lot of customers who can actually facilitate that feature. Whereas, for example, the bolt calculation we developed for Ovivo for 3D, this is very interesting for a lot of customers. So when we calculate the price for the quote, we consider that, and the customer, if you ask us for a development, typically you pay only part of the development costs. And yeah, let's say the share depends on how likely it is, how interesting it will be for other customers. And this is why I generalize that requirement, so it is more attractive for other customers, and you pay less essentially. Okay. After that, yeah, you send us the purchase order, and there's a little down payment to get things rolling, and then we start with the development. And as I mentioned, after the development started, we will start with pre-releases, and while you look at this, we continue with the development. You check these pre-releases or the videos we sent you. You give us feedback. The feedback will be incorporated in the development, and new releases will be created till we reach the final release of that function in a PlantTool. And if it's released, then there is the final payment, and that's it. So that is the whole process of the workflow, or the whole workflow for the customer development. What we will not do is to, if you approach us with a requirement and you say this function is only for you, because that would restrict us in regards to our manpower to be more. It's just an overhead. If all the functions we developed over the years, and you will get a list in a moment, and we would develop it only for a specific customer, it's just a management nightmare on our side, because then we have a lot of versions, we need to maintain them, potentially we need to keep them, because if you say, well, we developed, for example, PlantSpec-Driven was developed in 2012 and released in 2013. If the customer wouldn't have said, well, yeah, that's my own development, no one is using that, then a few years later he comes, oh, now I want to have it updated on Plant3D 2021, for example. Then it's a lot of work. It's hard to calculate what it means, what are the changes in the API of Plant3D, and so on. So this way, it's always maintained. All the functions we developed in the past are part of PlantTools. Okay, some examples. Not quite sure how complete that list is. But it gives you a good idea. Again, maybe PlantSync is kind of, PlantSync and PlantSpec-Driven are kind of exceptions, because as I mentioned, INEO, I think it was not under the name PlantSync at the beginning when they wanted us to develop this, but it became PlantSync right away because the PO came after we started with the development. So I think that was 2008/2009. That was essentially at the very beginning. We started with AutoCAD P90 2009. And PlantSpec-Driven is the last plant tool to be developed as a new or a completely separate plant tool, and that was for Vogelbusch in Vienna in 2012 and 13. And it's constantly improved. You will see in a moment, actually, from a US customer especially. DWG export allows you to export now also P90, but at that time 3D drawings that as standard AutoCAD drawings for OVivo. The bolt calculation we finished beginning of last year, I think March or so. That was also developed for OVivo in Austria. Well, they split it up between Austria and Germany, I think, the costs. Yeah, then I mentioned project and drawing creation and the rule-based block insert. That was both INEO, yeah, some smaller feature for PlantLink by Johnson Controls in France. Yeah, so some additional features for, I don't want to mention all of them now, and maybe so you see here CRB, it's all CRB. They started, I think, in 2016. They are in Kansas City with their headquarters, and they spend a lot of money every year, almost 6 digits every year, for development for PlantTools. They constantly improve the way the P&IDs are well drawn, but more about the data. That's a lot of things are about the data. Change logging, for example, so all the changes you make in your P&ID drawings will be logged, and you can browse them, and you see the history of your changes for a property or for an object. Improvements in attribute flow in plant spec driven, and now currently we work on a new UI for off-page connectors and the way you can connect off-page connectors. A lot of interesting features, and these are the features where we already have orders from customers. Again, CRB. Actually, the list of CRB is much longer, but I kept it to the main highlights. And then we have a new customer in Denmark and India. They want us to adapt plant spec driven, some additional features, and also to the assembly function in Plant Express tools, and also adapt plant spec driven and Plant Express tools on Volt, and which then essentially helps us to adapt PlantTools for BIM 360 or Autodesk Construction Cloud, as it is called now. But that's a whole new ball game, BIM 360. But yeah, and then some long-standing development for INEO for Plant Data Manager. So you see, the list is quite long, and since, as I mentioned, 2016 or so, there is a lot of development from customers for PlantTools, because for the various motivations, as I mentioned in the beginning. Okay, again, I want to mention our blog. So if you go to the Auxalia homepage and switch to English, then you will see in the menu there is Plant blog. All my colleagues provide only German content. So if you switch to English, it's all about Plant, more or less. So there is a blog where I have some blogs in there. And also for those of you who already use PlantTools, I recommend the online documentation. I started with Plant Data Manager and Plant Express tools. They are very complete. So they are not only videos. In the past, I created only videos, or mostly videos. But now, in addition to that, I also started documenting the functions in writing and with images, and the only thing in Plant Express tools missing is the bolt calculation, but there are extensive videos for that. So documentation is not quite up to date in regards to having everything in Word or in writing and with images, but there are still a lot of videos. Okay, then I thank you for your participation on that session, and yeah, this was my last session in the last 3 days. So I hope you enjoyed our keynotes in general, and if you have any questions, send an email either to me if you have my email address, or just to info@auxalia.com, and I will get back to you. Have a nice weekend. Bye.